Welcome to Whitespace DCD's video news roundup with Max and Peter. This week, Max, you've been excited by Qualcomm, or somewhat excited by Qualcomm.
Yes, no, seriously excited about Qualcomm actually, because so for a couple of years now, people have been saying, oh, Qualcomm is working on ARM chips for the data center, and they're going to release some server chips, but there were no details. Nobody knew if they were actually doing it, how serious it was. And some people, for example me, I just lost faith. I decided that, you know, it's yet another canned ARM project. Mm-hmm. And this week they've came out with some details. Apparently they are working on a chip. It's 24 cores per die, and it's already sampling with select customers. So there are people who are already running their Qualcomm ARM chips. Qualcomm, of course, is the supplier for well, pretty much anyone who's not Samsung or Apple in terms of mobile chips.
Yep.
So they do know their ARM, and they're definitely the guys to adapt it for the data center needs.
The big enterprise IT news, of course, this week is the confirmation that Dell is going to buy EMC, even though EMC is substantially larger than Dell. It's one of those weird deals. It's the biggest IT merger ever. Dell's had to borrow a lot of money to do it, and it's been allowed to borrow this money apparently because it's done so well at paying back the money it borrowed 2 years ago to take itself private and off the stock market.
Yeah, so I mean, first time I heard about this, I thought I've misheard it, and surely this can't be right and this can't be real, but apparently it's going ahead.
Yeah, and HP and all the other companies that thought about buying EMC and failed to buy it are saying what a bad idea this one is. Everyone's so bored with giant IT companies merging. The best comment I saw was Ashley Vance, who said, why doesn't Dell, IBM, Cisco, EMC and HP all merge at once and save us the bother?
But there's an alternative. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. People are getting fed up with the big IT companies, and they're turning to unbranded servers and white label stuff. And there was an interesting report this week from 451 Research, which essentially says that people are much more interested in converged infrastructure. So, for example, in the next quarter, about 17% of respondents to this survey, it's a fairly big sample size, so it might be actually indicative of something. 17% want to invest in traditional servers, whereas 40% want to invest in converged infrastructure. And that includes things like VCEs, vBlocks, or NetApp's FlexPods, or VMware's EvoRail, you know, like fairly exotic things a couple of years ago, but now they're really coming into their own. And this number also includes white box servers. According to the same research, 4% of businesses currently have some white label servers in their data centers, but a further 6 are considering investing into white box over the next 3 months. 6%, so that brings the total number of people who are experimenting with this sort of new format, and probably OpenStack as well, because two really go together, to 10%.
Right. The trouble with white box, though, is it's difficult to know whether you can trust it or not. Which is why I was interested in the area of networking this week to see some testing announced for open compute based switches. These are white box switches built to the open compute open source hardware specifications. Some months ago there was a bit of a flap in the media about the poor quality, so supposedly, of testing of open compute based products, and whatever the merits of that flap, it seems that work was already going on to get some very good testing in place on networking kit at the University of New Hampshire. I was really pleased to talk to the University of New Hampshire about this because I've been aware of them for a long while. The University of New Hampshire Interoperability Testing Lab has outlived some of the test protocols which it started testing. They tested implementations of IBM Token Ring and of FDDI. These are networking protocols that aren't really there anymore.
I'm too young to know this.
Yeah, and last time I spoke to the University of New Hampshire Testing Lab, I was talking to them about one of these obscure protocols, I feel sure.
Oh, so they're like coming back, and we definitely know that these tests are to be trusted.
Yeah, and they're very central in the Ethernet world. Sort of faster versions of Ethernet will get tested through this program, and the program is also run sort of with a lot of student involvement. So they turn out a lot of students who understand and are interested in network tests, which has got to be a good thing for the industry. They are great, and they are excited by it. And that article has had the most sort of, shall we say, proofreading help from people at the lab who spotted the mistakes in it.
Oh no! Because
they're thorough, they're careful, and we love them. You mentioned AMD, Max. I mean, there's been more news about them.
Yeah. And again, it's sort of AMD. I love the underdog, right? And AMD, which is also working on ARM chips, is apparently selling more of its sort of manufacturing capacity. Now, we all heard that AMD is now fabless, and that's true. It's sort of like, I think it was 2013 they sold off their chip manufacturing to global foundries. I might be wrong on the year, but they did. But that's not all there is. Fabs are not all there is to chip production. So fabs output, big wafers with sort of like chip embryos. They need to be packaged, tested, cut apart first of all. And AMD still maintained factories doing this in Malaysia and China. Now they're selling them to a Chinese subsidiary of Fujitsu, I believe. And this means AMD is getting some cash it really needs, and it still maintains this capability because they have a sort of like a very nice deal over the next 5 years. Whenever they need something, they will come to these factories and the factories will produce it.
And finally, energy taxes.
Yes, we hate those, right?
Well, in principle, I think electricity should be taxed very high to discourage people using it and thereby reduce the world's greenhouse emissions. The trouble is you can't tax it uniformly, and if you increase energy taxes in your country, the same amount of power gets consumed, but all the data centres move elsewhere across the border to places where electricity is cheaper. Data centres effectively become a kind of economic migrant. And this phenomenon has been spotted in the Nordics, where Sweden has very high energy taxes. And it has got rebates for industry, but it hasn't yet been applying those rebates to the data center industry because it doesn't, just because of the way in which industries get categorized by the Swedish government system.
That's just not fair.
Yes, and over the border in Finland, data centers don't pay such high electricity taxes. I mean, and you think a tax is just going to be a little bit on top of the price. It's actually like 40% of the price of electricity in Sweden is the tax. And over the border in Finland, that tax isn't applied, so electricity is that much cheaper. And that, if your data center is most of the operating cost of your data center is electricity, it can be like a quarter of the cost of the total cost of ownership of your data center can be taxed if you're building it in Sweden. Which makes me wonder how Facebook can afford to be running Luleå, and thinking that there may be some deals going on behind the scenes already there. But anyway, what we found out at the end of last week was that a Swedish government commissioned report, so commissioned by the Swedish government, has recommended that the Swedish government should take off 97% of the energy tax on data centres. So from the beginning of 2017, the total cost of ownership of data centres in Sweden could go down by 25%. So more data centres following Facebook into Luleå and places like that.
Yeah, exactly. The Node Pole. That's still there are still lots available. So there's all the projects already going on. As people like KNC Miner and Hydro 66, I think, is close to finishing. So those and those facilities are going to become a lot more viable now.
Yeah,
if this comes to pass.
Yeah, and I think part of the lobbying to make it happen was KNC Miner was involved. they said they were considering going to Finland, even though they're a Swedish company. Okay, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. See you next week.
Bye bye.